Good evening, viewer, and welcome to Take on Tech. This is a program that explores technological issues and concepts and brings you an expert panel to break it down for you and to show you how you can engage with internet issues and how relevant they are in your day-to-day life. Today we are going to be looking at, we are going to be taking stock of internet governance in Kenya. But before we go into the main discussion, we go over to Jane Wamboi for our hashtag handles. Over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Grace. A warm welcome once again to Take on Tech. My name is Jane Wamboi, and as aforementioned, today we're going to be looking at the state of internet governance and just taking stock of how far we have come and what more we need to do. And when we talk about issues to do with internet governance, we're looking at matters like, the internet sustainability here in Kenya, issues to do with security, stability, the robustness of the whole internet space here in Kenya. So we'd like for you to be part of this discussion. And you can do so via our communication platforms. On Twitter, the hashtag is hashtag Take On Tech. Our official station handle is at KBC Television. My handle is Jane Wamboi, and my colleague on the other side of the studio, she is at Grace Gedaiga. I will be back to sample some of your views as we proceed on with the show, but for now, let's just get straight into it. Back to you, Grace.
Welcome again. I would like to introduce my panel. On my immediate left is Grace Bomu, who is an internet lawyer. Welcome to the program, Grace. Next, we have Mutemi, who is a policy, an internet law and policy expert. Welcome to the program, Masi. And next, we have Victor Kopiyo, who is a human rights lawyer and a technology enthusiast.
Thank you.
Welcome to the program. Now, Grace, we have we always hear about internet governance in this country, Kenya being among the first countries that embraced internet governance. Would you tell us what is internet governance in ordinary language?
Thank you. Internet governance simply means making laws and policies about the internet. And the peculiar thing about internet governance is that it involves everybody, because the internet has really changed how we live, how we do things, how we interact, and it's so cross-cutting that nobody has the monopoly of knowledge on what it means to us today and what it's going to mean to us in the future. So internet governance is about bringing different people together, different experts, and by experts we mean even users, we mean even people who have been making laws before or have been contributing to policy before, even if it's not necessarily on the internet. We mean technologists who are creating and going on to create the internet. We mean children who hold the future of the internet.
Okay, Grace will interrupt you because there's a problem with your microphone, and as they check, let's go to Kopiyo. Kopiyo, you can take it over from where Grace left. Why do we need internet governance?
Well, the internet is, has moved. If you look at the history of how, the internet came up, it was a project of universities and governments, the US government for that matter. And as the years, it has become a public resource, which now everybody uses from, all parts of the world. So it is not something for a selected few. It is a service, it is a platform, it is an infrastructure that has now become what we call a public good. That because everybody uses it, then everybody should have a say in how it is run, so that it is not a small group of people who decide how it runs, but the governance is democratic and allows the views of all stakeholders to be incorporated in how the internet is run and managed.
Back to you, Grace. You have been handed over another microphone. This just demonstrates some of the technological challenges that we go through. So when you hear about elections having technological challenges, even at this level, we still have them. So Grace, maybe you can pick it from where you left. Victor has already explained why we need, you were just giving us a definition, a simple definition for an ordinary person to understand what internet governance is all about?
Yeah, so basically what I was saying is that unlike many other governance processes that are led by governments and that are the monopoly of government, internet governance incorporates everybody because everybody is not only affected, but because there's so much we don't know about the internet, there's so much that is changing about the internet, that it cannot be only one group, or the expertise is not held by only one group. It's so cross-cutting across so many issues, including culture. So that is why everybody is needed.
Mercy will come to you, but before we do that, I will give this opportunity to Victor. I understand there was an internet governance forum last week. Take us through what happened, what it was all about.
Yes, so we held the Kenya Internet Governance Forum on Thursday, 1st of August last week. And the purpose of this was basically to scale down the conversations relating to internet governance at the local level. Because like I said, the internet is for everybody, and so everybody must have a say. So this forum was bringing together different stakeholders, from government to business, to civil society, to ordinary members of the public, to come and discuss topical issues that affect the internet that we are using today. And the theme of the event was One Kenya, One Vision, One Net, One Internet. That, you know, it is one internet. You can't create your internet at home. It is the same one. So can we come and address the issues that are facing us? And some of the three key issues that were being addressed at the conference one was data governance. We can see how the use of data is becoming a big deal, not just in terms of government use and starting collecting data from Huduma number, but we are seeing it being used. We do M-Pesa transactions, so we are transacting online. So data is an important issue to discuss. The second issue is security. How secure are our online transactions? How secure is the internet? How safe is it for everybody to use? So that was the second issue that was being discussed. And the third one was inclusion. We must appreciate that we want to bring everybody on board. And so the aspect of inclusion now was being discussed to ensure that is everybody connected? And those who are not connected, what are those things that we can do? So the conference highlighted the three key areas. Another aspect of the conference was a youth internet governance forum, because we realized that young people are an important demographic in terms of internet use. They use the internet differently from how we use it. And so they were also given a platform to discuss the issues that are relevant for them and also present them to the main group. But also, in addition, there was a training that was held prior to the IGF, which was basically an opportunity to bring more new voices into the internet governance discourse. And this was run by Kiktenet, and I'm sure Grace will talk more about it.
I think Grace has been handed that. But very interesting to hear that issues of data, because data is very important. And even as we are going, there's actually a call for public participation by Parliament, so that people are supposed to give their views. So I think this is a very opportune moment to speak about that and to let wananchi know that. Grace, tell us about the training.
So the training was basically, there are a lot of young people who we've come across, and even young not in terms of age only, but in terms of knowledge of internet policy making. So they have the passion, they have the passion to participate in these processes, but they wanted to know the basics. For example, what is the internet? How did the internet come about? What are the issues that make it so different to govern, So we came together, we brought about 40 of these people, and we had a 3-day training where we went through these issues. The interesting thing is that we took it from practitioners. The faculty was made up of practitioners. Some of them are technologists who are creating technology. Others are service providers, like mobile network operators or infrastructure providers. Others are in the human rights field, and they are practicing, some of them in policy making, some of them in litigation. They go to court when they think that some rights need interpretation from the courts. And so through this forum, we were able to create interests among these fellows so that they can take up these issues, not only here in Kenya, but also in the global scale.
Mercy, finally we come to you. I understand that you are a beneficiary of one of these training, actually the training that comes before the Internet Governance Forum. Take us through.
Yeah, I think I was in the second cohort of the Kenya School of Internet Governance, and as Grace was saying, what's really interesting about internet governance is that so many of us are online and we have an opinion about things, but we don't really realize that's internet governance. For example, let me give an example. Just this week we had a judgment for defamation, the Tony Monchama case. It's very easy to not see the connection between that's defamation that happened on Twitter. It's a judgment on defamation on Twitter. So it's an issue, it's an internet governance issue. Recently, Huduma number was all everyone could talk about. So yes, we'll talk about Huduma number in thrones, but we don't make the connection that that's also an internet governance issue. When people complain about, oh, my service provider steals data from me, that's an internet governance issue. So it starts from a place of, yes, you have problems, you love the internet, yes, you found yourself online and you love the internet, and there are these problems. You can't quite put them in words because even as you go through a law school training, these are not issues that you've been taught. They're sort of emerging issues. The human rights issues, for example, yes, but in an online context. It's right to privacy, but now with a context, with an internet context, and it's a bit more difficult to understand and to see how it's supposed to be approached by the law. So I did the second cohort for the Kenya School of Internet Governance, and what it does is it gives you a basic understanding. So what is the internet, and why is it so difficult to control? Why should it even be controlled in the first place? What was the idea behind coming up with the internet? What are different governments doing? What's your government doing about, the internet governance issues? So I would say, even for the next year, anybody who is just interested in conversations around the internet, you see these conversations everywhere. It's just they're not called internet governance conversations. Yeah, everywhere on Twitter, someone will be complaining about something somebody did online. Yeah, we've had fights about bloggers. We've had fights about even cabinet secretaries doing things online. You don't realize that that's actually a very key aspect of internet governance. And even when you say things like, in Nairobi, I have very good internet connection. Yeah, when I go to my upcountry, I don't even have cellular connection to make a phone call. That's an internet governance issue. It could be put in a very fancy way, digital inclusion or something like that, but at the root of it, it's internet governance. So what for me, that was a really good platform to be able to understand the issues, put them in baskets, a legal basket. This is a legal issue. This is a human rights issue. This is an access issue. And if I was, as a lawyer with a legal background, if I was to approach this issue, then these are the people I need to talk to. These are the people I need to approach. So KESI gives you a really good foundation if you are interested in pursuing a career even in internet law and policy.
So would you say that those people who go to climb on a certain tree in some areas, or they have to walk to some certain mountain to get a mobile signal, is that an internet governance?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even the people who feed your phone with like a 10 shillings airtime and immediately it's gone and you go home complaining about it, that's an internet governance issue. I mean, at that point you won't say, this is internet governance. At that point you'll just say, I'm being robbed. But it has other implications as well,
Yeah. Have you been able to link the training with your work?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's interesting for us lawyers in today's world. I keep saying it's very hard to find a case that doesn't involve an internet aspect to it. For example, if you're trying a simple divorce case, sometimes you're forced to produce evidence in the form of emails. Yeah? So at some point, the law has to think about how do we produce electronic evidence in court. Again, that's still internet governance. But now, in my line of work, what I found myself doing, especially with the issue of human rights, is doing litigation to ask the courts, to sort of force the courts to interpret human rights in a digital context. For years, we've had a lot of pronouncements, for example, on the issue of the right to privacy. We've had pronouncements on freedom of expression. It's very clear what freedom of expression is in the context of going to a crusade and saying whatever you want to say. But how about online? Yeah? So how about a blogger who just wants to say whatever they want to say? Is that different from going to a crusade at Uhuru Park and preaching what you want? So we need this kind of pronouncements by the courts, because then there's also a feeling that the government needs to control this animal called the internet. It's a bit too powerful. We saw how powerful it was during elections, things like that. In the area of privacy, for example, when I give my information to my service providers, can they give my information to the government without telling me? Can they help in an investigation of a crime without informing me, and how much information can they give? These are new issues that weren't there before. You talk about Huduma number and why people were complaining so much about it. So what's the issue with giving the government your biometric information? So we're at a point where these questions are sort of universal and everybody is struggling with them. But we need our courts to give us precedent, because yes, the law is there. We just don't know how to apply it in a digital context. So that's how, for me, I've been able to incorporate internet governance in my work. It's traditional litigation, yes. It's just we're acknowledging the internet is transforming everything. So how should we proceed?
Okay.
Yeah.
Grace, in designing the curriculum for Kenya School of Internet Governance, were those some of the issues that you were hoping would be some of the outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We are really excited that, and it's not just lawyers, by the way, even people who are in agriculture find a lot of connection between what they have learned as internet governance and their work. Because now even people in agriculture want to think about themselves in the whole chain, they want to know about food production and when to best produce their food so that they can market it. And this is information that they can get from the internet or through the internet. And then you find that the internet is growing bigger and bigger. It's now connecting to, when we were learning about infrastructure, we learned also about things like satellite, imagery, and how that is connected to connected with the internet, and how farmers, for example, or people in agriculture can use satellite information to better predict their markets and even sometimes store food as they wait for a better marketing time. And so it cuts across everywhere. When we were learning about issues like socio-cultural issues, and that's how the internet applies differently to different situations. We heard from people in the education sector who are really excited about issues such as online learning, and online learning not just in the traditional sense of the teacher being in front and giving knowledge to the students, but also that interaction that is enabled by the internet. So the teacher also gauges the expectations of the students, and then the students are also able to interact with the teacher. And it's so cross-cutting. It's in everything. It's even in governance. The people from government who came to the school to teach us, whether they are from like the ministries where they make policy, they could tell us how it has become easier to connect with the public because they post their materials online for the public to look at and to give their views on. then also in law enforcement, and Mercy has touched a bit on that, and I'm sure Gigi, now you can see how what a good school it was if these are the kind of students that come.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so those are some of the issues that we touched upon.
All right. Kopiyo, we come back to you as the chair of the Kenya Internet Governance Forum. Would you please outline some of the outcomes and what are some of the priorities moving forward?
Yes, thank you very much. Some of the issues that came up, of course, I mentioned that there were 3 key streams that we were discussing. That is data governance, digital inclusion, and safety and security. And some of the outcomes in relation to those was, for example, on data governance, that we need a policy and legal framework in place, and that needs to be fast-tracked. We currently have a number of bills that are pending before Parliament, but those ones need to be fast-tracked. But at the same time, they need to ensure that they respect human rights and the rights of citizens. There is need for, greater sensitization of the actors who are handling data of citizens, whichever capacity they are, whether they are government or private sector bodies, that there's need to be more sensitization of those institutions in terms of how they're handling data. When it comes to safety and security, one of the key recommendations was that there's need for collaboration amongst the various actors, that one of the biggest challenges we have is in terms of rapid response. If there's a cyber attack, then how do you ensure that the agencies are able to speak to each other and respond to the issues? Last year, there were more than 10,000 attacks that were recorded, so it's an issue. The other aspect was the need for capacity building of the different, get more young people interested in security, build the capacity because it's a passion-driven exercise, but also thirdly, to ensure that, currently, thanks to Mercy, the cybercrime law, there are a number of provisions which were suspended by the court, and it's important for the government to relook at those provisions and develop new proposals that are going to be rights respecting, so that we can ensure the safety and security of the space. And lastly, when it comes to digital inclusion, that there are a number of roles that, we need to find ways of promoting access, especially to the unconnected, and use all possible mechanisms. The regulator has a budget, and they need to apply that budget to ensure that those who are not connected get connected. And also service providers need to address the quality of service issues that are present. That is something that was of concern. And of course, other issues relating to that are the cost of devices, the cost of connectivity in terms of what is the cost of bundles, what is the cost of credit, because those ones affect the capacity of people to actually connect to the networks.
Three issues that you keep talking about: inclusion, data governance, and security. And Grace here, when I was looking at some of the work about KESIC, there were issues about inclusion. Now, speak to the ordinary person at home and tell them what this digital inclusion is all about in a nutshell, so that by the time we are done with the program, they'll be able to understand how this relates to them and how it interacts with internet governance.
Thank you, Gigi. So when we talk about inclusion, we can look at it at many, many layers. One of it is about the technology itself, yeah? Especially when you're here in Africa, there are a lot of questions about how technology is developed. Yeah. Most of the time, and even in some of these cases that you're seeing in court, people are questioning which is this technology that is being brought, I don't think technology like biometrics, for example, was developed here. And so the biometrics that the kits that come, they are meant for taking fingerprints, but that maybe doesn't take into consideration that here there are a lot of informal workers who do work that really tampers with fingerprints, right? And so you find that when the technology comes, people have to, press and press and press in order for their fingerprints to be seen, because the technology was developed without including the perspectives here. So that is one, and there are so many examples of inclusion in how technology is developed. And that
was it that would we say, for example, during elections, I saw people trying to fumble with different fingers, trying to press this, press that. Is that in relation to what you've just
It totally is. You'll be surprised that, for example, at airports, the biometric problem is not as huge, because the people who travel so much, majority of them are, white-collar workers who don't tamper so much with their fingerprints. And so for them, that technology is a bit more inclusive. So it's normally not the same problem as, elections. There were all those memes about people folding their mouths as they tried to get their fingerprints to be taken. So that is one, and it ties back to internet governance, that we all need to join the conversation, so that even when issues of technology development are being discussed, we can bring our own points of view which are different from what they already have. So that is one. The second issue is people, and my colleague Kopiyo has already talked about that. Who are the people who are included as technology is being, as policy is being made? Yeah, do we have children? Do we have women? We had a very interesting discussion during both the school and the forum, where people were asking about the statistics that we get. We get statistics that say everybody has a phone, but is it true? Do all women in this country have phones? Do women use phones the same way as men? Are there differences in how they use their phones? And therefore, how should we respond to this? This is a policy issue. And also children, the way children and young people use technology is so different from how older people, I'm not saying that I'm old, is different from how older people use technology. And so we need to think about this as issues of inclusion. And finally, it's also about not only including people in making policy, but also including people when you're making the technology. For example, during the forum, somebody asked a very interesting question. They asked, if there was a physically disabled person or a person with disability who wanted to follow this conversation, are they able to? Are they able to use technology? Are we developing, or are we bringing in technology that responds to their needs? And the question was actually, the answer was actually to a large extent, no. When we bring in, for example, the phones or the software for the visually disabled people, it hasn't yet factored in our local languages. And so, if you have both the physical disability as well as a language disability, you are excluded from that technology. And so these are also issues that we discussed, and we were looking at how to make technology more inclusive.
I think that dovetails now into the issue of data. And Mercy, please take us through some of the data concerns that Wananchi should be concerned about.
Okay. First, data is a very wide area. It's easy to think of it as data becomes a problem when you need to collect my biometric information. But I think it's more elementary. It's way before that. For example, most of us use mobile money services, yeah? And every time you're doing, it's now according to the law, every time you do a mobile money transaction, you have to give your details. Most of us, when we enter a building, you have to give your information. Yes, and sometimes you give your ID number. Some of them are very serious. They even take the ID and they remain with the ID. So you have to think about data from such an elementary point, not just from the very fancy data protection world, of how do we protect biometric data or system data or things like that. So how I would define it for myself, for anybody actually to begin the conversation is this: you have a right to privacy, and that right comes with it comes in a very neat package. And one of the components of the package is information that relates to you, information that relates to your family, relates to your personal affairs, should not be treated in such a cavalier manner. It should be treated very well, to be respected, should not be disclosed unnecessarily. People should not just be asking you, what's your HIV status? That's information, No, people shouldn't just walk up to you and say, are you married? Or how many children do you have? Or, very personal questions. That's where you start with data. Some of the things that we should be worried about as a country is we're a very trigger-happy country when it comes to technology. Yeah, our fame worldwide is M-Pesa, for example, and they know us as being, leading the way with technology. And what that does to our culture is we're very trigger-happy. You hear blockchain, and you will find something on blockchain in Kenya. You hear biometric registration, and somehow the government will start a biometric registration system. We're very trigger-happy with technology. What we're not good at is coming up with legislation beforehand to regulate the technology. Some people will argue it's a good thing that technology should not be controlled beforehand, but from a human rights perspective, if you let people do whatever it is that they want to do and then try and regulate it later, it almost never works. So while we have a constitutional right, for example, to privacy that protects our data, we don't have regulations, we don't have a specific law that tells businesses how to deal with our data. A lot of us are fans of mobile, what do you call it, financial products. We borrow loans on our phones. When data is harvested from our phones, later on we're wondering, how come I'm getting all these adverts? How come I'm targeted in this and this and this way, and you feel violated? That's because we do not have a data protection law. When it comes to things like huduma number and collection of data, there's so many people who are involved in that process. There's so many people who are engaged, young people even from the counties who are employed to collect the data. What stops them from selling your data, for example? What stops the international companies that have been engaged to give that service from selling your data?
Yeah, I think you raise a good point, and I think probably this would take its own discussion. The whole element of technology being so dynamic that law has to always play catch up. We take a short break. We go over to Jane, who will tell us what's happening on social media. Jane?
All right, let's just get straight to it. The hashtag is Take On Tech on Twitter. Let me start with the very first tweet that we had from Candy, who is saying, our biggest struggle still remains in the areas of accessibility, affordability, equality for disadvantaged groups, especially with the challenge of digital literacy. We have Ellie here who is saying, inclusivity in internet governance is what we need in Kenya, especially if we want better livelihoods and transformation for the youth in the digital space. We have, let me get that is John O'Dara following the discussion in regards to internet governance. Thank you so much. Barack Otieno rather saying, KIGF, I believe that is the Kenya Internet Governance Forum, is thinking globally and acting locally. All right? I do not know what you intended with that. Let's move on to Ngeda, who is saying there is still inadequate participation and contribution by Kenyans and Africans as a whole in internet governance. This is a gap that threatens the realization of a fully representative multi-stakeholder model. The whole issue of participation from the end user in regards to internet governance. Barack Otieno continues to say it's important that Kenyans pay attention to internet governance since we have become an information society where data is the oil that ensures the smooth running of the society. One more from Nancy, who's saying there is a gap that is fueled by the continued lack of political will and interest, especially in the policy-making processes, which are high-level and intergovernmental. And maybe we could just get one last one from Barack again, saying one of the key messages from the Internet Governance Forum was the need to ensure people with disability are given equal opportunities in the internet governance ecosystem. So there's a general feel of lack of participation from the population as a whole in terms of being part of the journey, wanting to know, and the whole issue when it comes to gaps, and that has to do with, political goodwill from our government, also digital literacy levels. And before we just get back to the discussion, there's one more tweet from Boniface Witaba, who is saying it's true and inclusivity goes hand in hand with awareness. A lack of awareness in internet governance leaves a majority of users little aware of what internet governance is in the first place, let alone how they can get involved in the process. So as you can see, the basics, starting with literacy levels, still remains a challenge when it comes to internet governance and involving the public as a whole. Back to you, Grace.
You've heard what people are commenting on social media. Kopiyo, is there anything you picked from there?
Yes, two things. One, just in response to what Mercy had said about privacy and data. I think a number of us, use applications like Truecaller. And one of the things we forget is that we all have a responsibility in how we manage our personal data and how we handle the data that is already on our phone. So if you install an application like Truecaller, for example, it harvests your call, your phone book on your phone, keeps it on a database so that the next time somebody else wants to check someone's number, they already have your database online and you can use the service. The problem is that you're handing over people's personal information to a third party without their consent. The other challenge we have is that we have new business models where the transaction, someone had said data is a new gold, new oil that is driving the society, that we are using free online services, you're using Gmail, you're using Facebook for free. But what we forget is that the product is you and your information. That is what is being harvested so that it can be sold to other third parties. On the final point was about inclusivity and joining the conversation. I think also, like Mercy had said, that these conversations they're the typical conversations that you have on a daily basis. There is no subject called internet governance. So long as anything you're doing on the internet is not working right, then you need to speak up about it in whichever platform that you have. So use the spaces that are available to express yourself about the issues. There are regulators, there are institutions, there are academia, the technical community. Everybody has a role and everybody can do something about it. So that's what I'd say.
Mercy, 1 minute, closing remarks.
I picked up on inclusivity, and I think that's something that keeps coming up. But I think for us, it's actually designed, our internet is designed to be discriminative. Right from access, not everybody is online, not everybody can come online, and not everybody has the ability to come online. It's cost issues, it's ability, it's literacy. But even when people are online, our government structure, for example, our regulations, when you look at laws that were passed like fake news, the government tends to be discriminative in its law-making role. You want to prefer some people to have these rights other than other people. So the inclusivity has to be by design from the beginning. If you're going to rely on the internet, all government services now are online. KRA iTax returns are only being done online. Registering for education is online. If you're going to insist on provision of services online, then the government must back it up with the willingness to provide infrastructure, to lower the cost, reduce the taxes on internet so that everybody can come on board. Otherwise, inclusivity becomes a topic for conferences and not in reality. So we have a very discriminative internet. It's for some people. You go on Twitter and you find a good percentage of Kenyans on Twitter, and you forget that your grandparents are not on Twitter, so they're not participating in the conversation, in the rich conversations. They don't know what the president was doing that day because they're not on that platform.
Grace?
I want to end on a more hopeful note and respond to what the viewer called Ngede said. As much as we have all these problems, I think it's a good thing that we as Kenyans have identified the problems. Secondly, that we are among African nations that have a pretty open space where we can discuss these issues. There are other countries where the internet is shut down on a whim, which is not a very good practice. So I encourage everybody to find these spaces and to also participate in internet governance.
That's it for today's Take on Tech. I want to thank you, the panelists, who have actually tried to break down what internet governance is all about. One of the contributors on Twitter indicated the need to have an inclusive internet governance where even youth participate. Now, next week on Take on Tech, we will be having young people who participated in the Internet Governance Forum, drawn from secondary schools. So please be sure to make a date with us. I want to thank Grace Bomu, an internet researcher, Mercy Mutemi, internet lawyer, and Victor Kopiyo, human rights lawyer and tech enthusiast. Until next week, my name is Grace Gidaiga. Goodbye.
Mm-hmm.